Hi everybody, my name is Dr. Sam Munroe and I am an ecologist. That means I study plants and animals and how they interact with their environment. I have a PhD in shark ecology and my research focused on understanding what sharks eat, what habitats they use, and their predatory behaviors. And today I am super pumped because we are going back in time to review one of the most infamous films in the Jaws franchise, starring a fit and fine Dennis Quaid. That's right, Jaws 3D. Now, if you want to jump straight into the reaction, that's cool. You can go to this, let's put it over here, this timestamp in the video. But I actually want to do a bit of a plot summary and talk about an aspect of this film that's always really bugged me before we jump into the reaction, because I think going through the plot very briefly really provides some important context for the crazy that we're about to see. Released in 1983, unlike the first two Jaws films that were set in the fictional town of Amity Island, Jaws 3D is set at SeaWorld in Florida, where a massive underwater park has just opened. But to make sure there is still some semblance of connection to the original film, the plot primarily follows Mike Brody, the eldest son of Chief Brody from the first two movies. And he now appears to be some kind of engineer at the park. I don't know, it's all very vague. And then with him is his girlfriend Catherine, who is a marine biologist and also works at the park. Joining them on their adventures is Sean Brody, Mike's little brother from the original films, who by the looks of him is on vacation from Cowboy Sleepaway Camp. And honestly, the only reasons for him being here seem to be so that the audience can occasionally think, "Aw, remember the cute kid from the first movie? We liked that movie."
Hey, you met my kid brother?
And also to hook up with Kelly, an entertainer also working for the park, played by Leah Thompson. But these two characters could be completely ripped out of this film, and it would have no effect on the main plot. They actually eventually do that later, so we won't be talking about them again.
I'm gonna go with Kelly.
Heart rate,
I think you should.
There is also this David Attenborough-style character here to film videos for the park. You know, if David Attenborough had been spawned out of the Upside Down.
If we kill this beastie on camera, I can guarantee you media coverage.
And then, of course, there is the money-hungry manager/owner of the park, played by none other than the incredible Oscar-winning actor Louis Gossett Jr., seen here firing his agent. In the dark of night, a great white shark breaks into the park's massive new open lagoon exhibit. And once it's in, it just sort of starts eating people and generally causing mass chaos. However, they eventually capture what they think is the white shark causing all of the drama, and they try to keep it on display. However, they discover, nope, that was only a juvenile shark, and its much larger mother that presumably gave birth in the park is swimming around somewhere. After some pretty PG-rated terror, the movie ends with the shark essentially destroying the park, and they eventually kill it the good old-fashioned way, and all is right with the world. Now, this film was originally done for 3D, hence the name, but apparently it looked pretty bad in theaters. Unfortunately, the modern-day side effect of this is when you try and watch the movie at home in 2D, it's real blurry. But what has always fascinated me about this film is why in the world did SeaWorld let them make this movie at their park and use their branding everywhere? This movie in many ways is an ad for the park because aside from the fact that their logo is in every other scene, some of the scenes that are cut throughout the main plot are just bits of their most popular shows. But when you watch the movie, you have to ask yourself, did anybody at SeaWorld read the script? Because throughout the movie, this script just makes SeaWorld look incompetent and evil. Their staff are greedy and bad at their jobs, the park is really poorly built, and the patrons at the park are just constantly in danger. SeaWorld is the straight-up villain of this movie. So why would they do this? Jaws 2 had been a major hit, it made a ton of money. So yeah, let's ride those coattails. Let's be in Jaws 3. Everyone will want to come to SeaWorld after they see this movie. I mean, I get that this isn't the worst movie ever made about SeaWorld. Still though. And by the way, this will be the first and only time I talk about Blackfish. Because we're here to have a good time. I couldn't find anything official that said SeaWorld ever regretted being a part of this movie. In fact, my understanding is that for many years after the film came out, if you went to the park, you could see memorabilia on the park tour from the movie, so they were really leaning into it. The exact opposite of what I would have done. Also, the cast of this movie blows my mind. How did they get these people in this movie? All of these people are so much better than this movie. So it's really important, by the way, when you watch it, that you don't use this to judge their talent or hold it against them. They were not given a lot to work with. So yeah, so many things about the making of this movie blow my mind, but that's not what we're here to talk about. We are here to talk about the science. So let's get into it. Let's review the science, or more commonly, the science fiction of Jaws 3D. So in this scene, this is the first time where we really get to see the shark in the movie. They are swimming through this underwater complex. Our heroes of the film, the marine biologist and the engineer, are swimming through the underwater complex to try and find a missing person. And we know that person's been eaten by a shark, but they don't know that yet. So they're looking around for him. What I do love about this is the dolphins. The dolphins kill me in this movie. They are, the best part of this movie. They're always there to save the day and save people. Yeah, so this is the bit that always gets me, because the dolphins know there's a shark around, so they're freaking out and saying, no, don't go outside of the shipwreck. It's just insane. Oh my god. So this scene is too much, because clearly the shark was on some kind of track, because it moves forward perfectly, but then it moves backwards in a straight line, which sharks cannot do. So we will talk about that. I do like, I suppose, that they've at least tried to intercut this scene with footage of real white sharks. There's those dolphins again, with the fake crazy shark. But the problem with that is that the fake shark is so much bigger than the footage that they have. It's pretty painfully obvious, right, that it's not even remotely the same. So while I like the effort of trying to add real footage, weirdly it makes it feel way more disconnected. So the moment I really want to highlight here is when the shark slams into that shipwreck and then reverses perfectly in a straight line, backing up like a car. Which, if you've watched any of my videos about sharks in the past, you know sharks can't do that. Sharks famously cannot swim backwards. If you watched my Deep Blue Sea review, we talked a little bit about this, but the caudal fin, or the tail fin of a shark, is designed for forward propulsion only. Their pectoral fins, which are the fins on the sides of their bodies, these fins are quite rigid and they are not flexible enough to allow a shark to swim backwards. Instead, pectoral fins are a little bit more like the wings on a plane. They are designed to give the shark lift and allow it to control where it is in the water column.
Could be a stroke of luck. If we kill this beastie on camera,
I hate this guy. This character's
I can
obnoxious.
guarantee you media coverage. Your mistake.
This scene kills me. Firstly, can you imagine
wide open.
any organization, but in particular SeaWorld, who has sold itself as this magical place that celebrates marine life, proposing to kill a shark and film it for the publicity?
Yeah.
Like any aquarium doing that seems insane, but SeaWorld in particular.
What do you mean, no?
Killing a shark in front of the children.
Well, I don't know if it's occurred to any of you all, but there isn't a great white alive in captivity anywhere. Now,
Accurate.
We're
True.
unique here, Calvin. You know that. If any facility can maintain a white, it's us. If
Maybe.
we could dart him, tranquilize him, we could get him in a holding
You would
tank.
need a great facility.
Hold it. No, this is crazy.
Yeah, so what she's proposing is actually period
shark
accurate,
killers. I know
because
'em.
there
Guys,
were
it's my
quite
father,
a few
my brother,
aquariums
myself.
in the past, not
They're
now so
murderers.
much, but in the past, definitely when this movie was being made, that were trying to keep white sharks in captivity. Quite a few all over the world made this attempt. They always failed, and we'll talk about that. They tried to keep a white shark in captivity, but every time they tried, it usually died within a few
Planning
weeks.
a network special?
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
Let's
we could be the
murder a
first
shark
people on the
on
planet to have a
TV
great white alive.
in front of all of our guests.
Not if my governor.
What could
puts
go
it
wrong?
first, miss.
So while there are many things in this movie that are definitely not accurate, this conversation does give accuracy. Is that what kids say? It's giving accuracy? I don't know. I'm almost 40. Quite a few attempts have been made to keep white sharks in captivity, mostly between the 1950s and 1990s. So as far as the film is concerned, this conversation that they're having, this debate, and this attempt to keep a white shark in captivity, I would argue, is accurate. This is something that aquariums did indeed really try to do. They just weren't very successful at it. I'm not going to give you a big long list of examples, but a few notable ones include the very first attempt, which was in 1955 at the Marine Land of the Pacific. As far as I could tell, this is the first recorded attempt to have a white shark in captivity, and it did not go well. The shark actually died within 1 day of being placed in the tank. In the 1970s and 1980s, SeaWorld in San Diego also tried to keep white sharks, but it did not go well. Once they were in captivity, I think the longest one survived was just over 2 weeks. Why were the sharks dying in these aquariums? Well, there could be a number of reasons. It is possible, for example, that the sharks were injured when they were captured and they just succumbed to those injuries. They just died from their injuries in the tank a few weeks later. It's also possible that they were sick before they were caught, or that they got sick once they were brought into captivity. That could have killed them. But even a perfectly healthy white shark that is captured and brought into an aquarium would struggle to survive in captivity, and there are two main reasons for this. The first problem is that white sharks need a lot of space. They have very large home ranges. They travel incredible distances, they migrate across oceans, and they can also dive to very deep depths, below 1,000 meters. So this is a shark that needs a lot of space, and aquariums just can't accommodate that usually. White sharks are also ram ventilators. This means that they need to constantly be swimming in order to move water across their gills and extract oxygen in order to breathe. If they stop swimming for long periods of time, they will suffocate and die. So not only do they need a lot of space just to move around, they constantly have to be in motion. And so this means you need a really big tank to keep a white shark, and the reality is most aquariums just don't have a tank big enough to house them properly. The second problem is food. White sharks are top or near the very top of the food chain. They eat big prey and they need a lot of food. Adults can eat quite large prey, for example, like sea turtles, seals, sea lions, dolphins, and sometimes even small whales. So based on that grocery list, it's hard to imagine any aquarium being able to supply an adult white shark with the food that it needs. Besides being extraordinarily expensive to get that type of food on a regular basis, it would probably be pretty unethical and unpopular for any aquarium to be chopping up dolphins to feed to sharks. I don't see that going over well. There is one exception to this rule, however, and that is the Monterey Bay Aquarium in California. This aquarium was the first to be able to successfully keep a white shark for up to 6 months before it eventually had to be released. They were able to do this for two reasons. One, they have a custom-built open ocean tank, which is this huge and beautiful tank that is designed specifically to house open water or open ocean species like a white shark. The other clever thing that they did was, rather than trying to catch and keep an adult white shark, they decided to keep a juvenile white shark, which is much smaller. The juveniles that the Monterey Bay Aquarium has kept have been roughly 1 to 2 meters in size, which is much smaller than an adult who can get up to 5 or 6 meters in size. Because they were keeping much smaller white sharks, they were able to keep the sharks in the open ocean pen, and they were perfectly comfortable in that smaller pen. The other benefit is, when you have a smaller shark, you can feed them smaller prey. So the juvenile white sharks were fed mainly on a diet of fish, which was perfectly fine for their size. But even under these idealized conditions, the aquarium was still only able to keep their white sharks for a maximum of about 6 months before they eventually had to release it because it was starting to get way too aggressive with the other fish in the tank. I guess what I'm really trying to say here about this scene, though, is that while it may seem strange to a modern day audience that any aquarium would try to keep a white shark, this scene is actually pretty accurate because many aquariums at the time were trying to do this. They weren't very successful, but they did try.
Down, down. That's it. We have to be sure the oxygen keeps running through his gills. We don't want to lose him.
Yeah. So at this point in the movie, they have indeed caught the shark, and they are now bringing it into an internal tank, it looks like. So they are going to be keeping it in captivity instead of killing it. Good decision. And what they're doing here, they've had to tranquilize the shark to capture it, so it cannot currently swim on its own. So what they're doing here is they're moving the shark forward around the tank to simulate swimming. And this is really important because, as I mentioned earlier, white sharks have to be kept moving to get water across their gills in order to breathe. So now what they're doing is a different strategy, and I actually have used this in the past. What they're doing here is they're putting a hose into the shark's mouth, and they're pumping water through the hose, through its mouth, and that water will pump across its gills. So this is also simulating the act of swimming. It's getting that water movement across its gills so it can extract oxygen and breathe, even though at the moment it's knocked out and it's not swimming. So this is actually, I can't believe I'm saying this about this movie, a fairly accurate scene. What you're seeing in this scene are techniques that shark scientists will use when they have been examining a shark, and you need to support that shark during its recovery. Basically, these are techniques that we use to keep the water flowing across the gills of the shark to help it breathe while it's recovering from a procedure or an examination where we've taken a sample until it's fully recovered and is able to swim on its own. The first strategy that they show us very briefly in this scene is they are moving the shark through the tank. This is what we often call swimming the shark, and this is exactly what it sounds like. You are holding the shark and you are swimming it around to get that water movement across its gills. I have personally used this technique. I've typically done it with much smaller sharks. I'm not making any claim to have worked with really big sharks like this one, but I have worked with sharks that are somewhere between 1 to 2 to 3 meters. If they're on the smaller end, you would sometimes just hold the shark behind its pectoral fins and move it in a figure 8 pattern while standing with it in the water, and this would help it recover after it's been examined and it just needs a minute to recover. I have also used the hose technique that they're showing in this film, and this is the technique that we typically used when the shark was brought on board for a longer or more invasive procedure, or even if it was just mildly sedated, which we would sometimes do. In those cases, it would need extra time to recover. So we would bring it on deck, put it in a tank, and we would use a hose to run seawater over its gills until it was recovered and ready to swim again. Hey everyone, one quick thing I just wanted to add here in post while I was editing is that while this scene with them swimming the shark to keep water running past the gills is pretty accurate, I wanted to be clear that you would never tranquilize a shark the way they did in this movie to try and capture it. This whole thing is pretty nuts. If you were to tranquilize and knock out a shark in open water, it would sink like a stone and drown. It would die. You would never do this. It is true that in controlled environments like aquariums or when a smaller shark is brought onto a boat for examination, we might sometimes use mild sedation on the shark. But again, this is in highly controlled environments, and as I say, the sedation is very mild and wears off usually quite quickly. So nothing at all like what you see in this film. You would never dart tranquilize a shark like this. It's nuts.
Oh, very posh. Yes, it's quite a display.
I love that shark.
But tell me, how do you contain the sharks in this part of the lagoon?
Well, it's that old shark screen, that bubble screen, Sharks
yeah.
don't like that. It's what they call marine segregation.
Oh my God. Yikes. That is uncomfortable. But the bubble screens that they're talking about were used to try and keep sharks away from beaches. So the use of them in this movie, I would call accurate. But we'll talk about it in more detail later. They don't work. So we'll talk about it. He's always drinking. He's running this big park and they're just always drinking and swimming.
Calvin, I got bad news.
Keep your voices down. Sit down.
Yeah, it's not the best place for an important meeting. I'm gonna give it to him.
Was it the shark?
Yes, it was. Oh my God, this shark. This shark is ridiculous.
It was a shark.
Yup.
It was a shark with a bite radius about a yard across.
Silly.
No.
Indicate a shark of some 35 feet in length.
Yeah, you would have noticed it by now. 35 feet is way too big. Way too big. It's not real. That's not a realistic size for a white shark at all.
Still has all its teeth. Yeah. That means it was a baby. Our shark
I have no
couldn't
idea
have
what she's
killed
talking
over.
about. Shark still has
Its
all
mother
its teeth.
did.
You talking about some damn shark's mother?
Don't you hear what she's saying here?
That might be the best line in the
Now, if
movie.
there is such an idea,
So what are they even talking about here? What is a bubble screen? Well, a bubble screen, or often also called a bubble curtain, is essentially a garden hose, if you like, that runs along the seafloor and it has holes in it. And this hose is usually placed in areas where there are swimmers near a beach. And what they do is they pump compressed air through the hose, and that creates a big wall of bubbles that shoots up from the hose, creating this bubble screen or curtain. And the idea behind it was this. Sharks at the time were thought to not like bubbles, and so if you create a big wall of bubbles, this would act as a shark barrier. The sharks wouldn't swim through the bubbles, and so this would act as a wall, essentially, keeping the sharks on one side and swimmers on the other. This strategy for keeping swimmers safe actually became pretty popular in the 1960s, and quite a few US hotels actually used this. In the movie's context, they're actually using it to try and keep the sharks separated from other animals in the tank. So when the movie was made, credit where credit is due, the filmmakers were not making this up. This was a real technique that was being used at the time that the movie was made. This was a real thing that people tried. However, subsequent testing has shown over and over and over again that bubble curtains do not work as a barrier for sharks. While a bubble curtain might temporarily spook some shark species, they all eventually just get used to it and swim right through. In fact, one study that was observing shark behavior around bubble curtains found that some of the sharks appeared to be playing in the bubbles. So yeah, not exactly the impenetrable barrier they were hoping it would be. So yeah, bubble curtains do not protect swimmers from sharks. There's a ton of evidence now to show they just don't work very successfully for that application. However, again, I would say that the movie's use of it is accurate. It is on brand for the time. It was a strategy that was being used. So it's hard to criticize the movie because it was only a little while later that people realized they really didn't work. Okay, next we really need to talk about this 35-foot white shark. By the way, if you're using the metric system, first of all, congratulations. But second of all, 35 feet converts to roughly 10.5 meters thereabouts. So yeah, way too big.
The largest confirmed and reliably documented white sharks have been about 6.1 meters or 20 feet in total length.
And when I say reliably documented, what I mean is somebody actually got out a measuring tape and measured the shark.
Of course, today we can use things like drone-based calibrated imaging and photogrammetry to obtain highly accurate measurements of shark size from a distance without ever having to handle the animal. But these are relatively recent technological advancements. They only really became common in shark research in the 2000s, 2010s. So obviously they weren't really in use for shark research at the time the movie was made. If you wanted to know how big a shark was back then, you had to measure it.
Now, every time I mention this maximum length of roughly 6 to 6.5 meters, people jump into the comments to tell me that that's not right. They give me examples like the Malta shark, which was caught in 1987. This was a shark that was reportedly 23 feet or 7 meters long. However, this measurement is disputed because there was no standardized verification. And then there's Kanga, a white shark that was caught off the coast of Australia that was reportedly very large. An original estimate suggested that her length was roughly 7 meters or 23 feet. Unfortunately, Kanga was much larger than the boat could accommodate, so they couldn't bring her on board. So instead what they did was they cut off its head and its pectoral fins, kept those, but ditched the rest of the body. Kanga's total length was then estimated from those body parts, which means it was never formally measured, which is such a bummer. The estimated size range for Kanga is a pretty big range. It goes from about 5 meters on the low end to up to 8 meters on the high end. The reason we have a size range for Kanga instead of an exact length is because when you use the jaws to try and estimate a size, it's not very precise, so you wind up getting a pretty variable range rather than one approximate value. So yes, Kanga may have been 7 meters, but we we have very low scientific certainty over its size because we never got a direct measurement. Now, there are many other anecdotal claims of sharks being 7.5 meters, and there's so many out there, I can't possibly go through them all. But as far as I can tell, when I've gone through my own research, I can't find any claims of a 7-meter or larger shark that's ever been verified. They've all been estimates at a distance, they've all been eyewitness accounts, or, we just didn't have the ability to take a measurement when someone saw the shark. And then, of course, there are all those really fun historical records of white sharks being over 30 feet in length. But I'm here to tell you, those are myths, and there are no reliable measurements to back those up. And I know what some of you are thinking. Sam, isn't there a record in the Guinness World Book of Records about 2 huge white sharks that were caught that were over 30 feet in length? And yes, there are. Those 2 record sharks were the Port Fairy shark, which was supposedly 10.9 meters or 36 feet in length, and this was caught off the coast of Australia in the 1870s. The other shark was the New Brunswick shark, which was supposedly 11.3 meters or 37 feet, and was caught in a weir in Canada in the 1930s. So let's break those down. Let's start with the Port Fairy shark that was caught in Australia in the 1800s. Unfortunately, and I hate to be the one to tell you this one is a total myth. Many years after the shark was caught, a marine biologist by the name of J.E. Randall re-examined the jaws that had been kept from this supposedly giant shark. He analyzed the tooth spacing and the jaw morphology of the shark and came to the conclusion that it was probably no bigger than roughly 5 meters, which is a totally normal total length for a great white shark. But what about the 37-foot white shark that was caught off the coast of Canada in the 1930s? Well, again, unfortunately, in reality, that one wasn't even a white shark at all. This shark was actually a basking shark. Totally different species. This species can get very big. It can grow to a maximum length of around 12 meters. So it certainly could have been the size that people reported. It just was a totally different shark. So what do I take away from the fact that they mention a 35-foot white shark in Jaws 3D? Well, when the movie was made, I suppose in the Guinness World Book of Records, it would have said, hey, we found a white shark that was 35 feet long. So honestly, I don't know, how much can we really blame the film? Maybe a lot. Maybe not so much. Maybe the writers had a copy of the World Book of Records open on their desk while they were writing this film. I don't know. But what you need to know is that a 35-foot white shark has never been found. The largest reliably measured white sharks we have so far are 6 to 6.5 meters. And maybe there is a 7-meter shark swimming around out there. And I hope one day we find it, because that would be really cool. And I also hope whoever finds it remembers to bring a measuring tape. The last little thing I'll mention in this scene that I really didn't understand is when the marine biologist character says, "Our shark still has all its teeth. That means it was a baby." And honestly, I have no idea what she's talking about here. Sharks continuously lose and regrow their teeth throughout their entire lives. They basically have this conveyor belt system for regrowing teeth. So the teeth at the front row are the ones that they're actively using, and then behind them they have all of these other less mature teeth that are slowly growing and getting ready to replace the current ones. Many sharks will actually replace their teeth every 1 to 2 weeks, so that's quite frequent, and some species will lose up to 30,000 teeth over the course of their lifetime. So you can't use the presence, I don't get that, you can't use the presence of all of its teeth to work out its age, because it'll always just have lots of teeth. But in this movie, it sounds to me like she's suggesting that baby sharks have their teeth and lose them over time and don't regrow them, so you just have adult sharks swimming around with dentures. I really do not follow what she's talking about here. Anyway, whatever she's trying to say, it is not correct, but I get the sense that maybe they were trying to be correct. They knew teeth in sharks are special. They knew there's cool stuff about shark teeth. They just maybe didn't quite know how to write it into the script. But the way that it's explained here, her line doesn't make any scientific sense. right, that was it. That was my scientific breakdown of Jaws 3D, but clearly not a good movie. During my research of the film, I actually found out that the original Jaws 3 sequel was meant to be a spoof, like it was meant to be a comedy, and it was gonna be called something like Jaws 3 People Zero, which, when you think about it, may have been a much better movie. But apparently that idea was crushed when Steven Spielberg, who directed the first one, came in and said, do not make a spoof film about Jaws or I will never work for you again, Universal Studios. And apparently that threat worked because they didn't make the comedy about Jaws. For me, Jaws 3D has always been one of these it's so bad it's good movies. I actually do come back to this one from time to time. I will put it on in the background if I am cleaning the house or I have had a couple drinks and I will put it on, and it is a really funny movie to have on in the background, but you have to be in the right mood for it. If you're sitting down to watch this as part of a Jaws franchise, or you've just seen the movie Jaws and you're following it up with this, you're not going to enjoy it. I think perhaps the most damning judgment of the film is that Jaws 4: The Revenge, which maybe one day we will talk about on the channel, completely writes Jaws 3D out of continuity. It's like it never happened, which I think is a bit harsh because I think that this movie is more rewatchable than Jaws 4. And you know what, I don't want to preempt my thoughts on Jaws 4 because I probably will eventually get around to doing that one. But yeah, I think Jaws 3D is more of a good time, hilarious, ridiculous movie than Jaws 4 is. So I would rather watch Jaws 3 than Jaws 4. So it's kind of funny that it's been completely written out of canon. That feels a bit harsh. If you did like this video, you know the drill. Please do all of this stuff. Like, share, subscribe. It really helps me out. Please also let me know what you think about this crazy movie in the comments. How would you rank it in the franchise? I actually think, just for its rewatchability and the fact it's so insane, I would rank it above even Jaws 2, because Jaws 2 was just kind of boring. At least this movie is wacky, crazy fun. I also have a really big collection of reaction videos and of course other ecology videos that you can check out if you're interested. Thanks again for being here, and I will see you next time.